Nintendo won the Direct. Absolutely. Actually, come to think of it. Nintendo won the Direct. Full stop. There's no getting around it. Everyone's coping and seething about the price, and every single one of these people is gonna buy the console anyway. You can't pirate the software. They're cracking down on physical. They're cracking down on pirate emulation, on various piracy methods. It's becoming harder and harder to pretend as if emulation is legal, right? Nintendo's coming after you, and there's just nothing you can possibly do about it. But watching this Direct and seeing all the major announcements we have for the next 3 months, not even the end of the year, because I think we are going to have another major Direct. Actually, we do already have another Direct later this month with Mario Kart World. We are going to see a lot more titles revealed as the year proceeds. We have a bunch of launch window titles already. Donkey Kong looks great, Mario Kart looks great, both of which are going to sell consoles. But we are going to get another major Direct sometime this year, really showing us just what the Switch 2 has to offer and just what the foreseeable future is going to look like. And it's officially over. Nintendo Switch won the console war, and I think Switch 2 is going to continue that by driving the major third parties out of business and just ruining PlayStation and Xbox. I do think that is the major thing going forward, is just driving these consoles out of the space, because I'm sick of hearing about them. I don't like hearing people pretend that they're good consoles. I definitely don't like people acting as if they're competitive. So seeing Nintendo dismantle Xbox and PlayStation, which will in turn take out the PC Master Race, which is entirely reliant on ports from those consoles. Nintendo is essentially going to be the dominant force in gaming for quite a long time, until some major revolution takes place, which, I mean, it's not going to last forever, but man, at least 30 years, I would say, because none of the other nothing else is as competitive. People spurg out about mobile gaming making more money, but mobile isn't really in competition with Nintendo. They're not the same thing at all, right? PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, the direct competitors to what Nintendo does, have completely fallen. They're not competitive, and they've completely just fallen by the wayside. And I think a really good example of why it's Elden Ring, right? Duskblood. FromSoftware has bent the knee to Nintendo. They saw just how meager and pathetic Elden Ring sales numbers actually were compared to what Nintendo did with Super Mario Bros. Wonder and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and they just had to side with the winning team, right? Obviously, we don't actually know what the specifics of why this deal was made, but they did. The first thing they did after getting independence from Bandai Namco was go to Nintendo and produce this game. So this is really interesting to me, because I think it pretty clearly demonstrates what's going to happen every time some minor third-party release gets some relevancy on PlayStation and Xbox, is that people are going to worship it. They're going to act like it's the greatest thing ever. They're going to act like it's some industry-defining thing. They're going to pretend like it's the greatest thing ever made. And then, first of all, the game is going to fall off because it's not that good. But second of all, every single time, the developer is going to have to crawl to Nintendo in order to, maintain their relevancy and to stay competitive, right? That is going to be essential in an industry where Nintendo is the dominant market leader, is that these third parties are not going to be able to remain competitive if they're not on the primary gaming platform. And I think FromSoftware knows that. They understood that the Elden Ring thing was just a fad, that it's not sustainable, and that they need to expand, and that they need to partner with a studio with a company that actually understands video games and understands that FromSoft can't keep putting out the same game over and over and over again. I think Miyazaki understands that better than anyone, actually. That, like, the FromSoft formula is old, it's tired, it's drawn out, and just putting out more of it is just going to lead to, like, diminishing returns. So that's why they went to Nintendo, why they're like trying to expand and like do all this other stuff, Armored Core, Night Rain, they understand that in order to stay relevant, they're going to have to grow and evolve as a company and try to reach Nintendo's level. They never will, obviously, but like, that is the goal to be aspired to, and yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting to see this happen because, like for the past 3 years, Elden Ring has been like the only thing that people can use to weaponize against Nintendo. It's the one game that people can pretend is like good or hardcore or like the best in the industry. And in the end, it blew up in their faces because FromSoft is in the same position that like Square Enix was in the 2000s, where like because of their massive success in the 90s, because of like their cultural significance and because of like how prominent they were with certain groups of people, like you could not criticize Square Enix in the 2000s, even though their glory days were long behind them, right? That was obvious to a lot of people even then that something was wrong with like how they refused to support Nintendo and how like they just slowly began to erode and become like kind of a joke, right? Square just completely fell off and became irrelevant, after the merger and after like their commitment to like trying to sell PlayStation consoles, right? Like it just completely destroyed their company, right? But people like bent over backwards and excused everything they did and tried to make it out like it was some great master plan, like they tried to make Nintendo look like the bad guy in that situation. And yet in 2025, Nintendo is putting out better RPGs than Square ever did. In between Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Mario and Luigi's Brothership, Fire Emblem, like, Nintendo is stomping Square's recent efforts. Everything. Yeah, I would say like modern Nintendo RPGs are better than like the all-time greatest Squaresoft RPGs. Like, so better than Final Fantasy VI, better than 7. And the same thing is kind of happening to FromSoft, right? Like Nintendo stomped them with Zelda. They have more room for growth. They're more flexible. They can produce like high quality spin-off content. They have B and C teams that people actually support, Like FromSoft right now is essentially a one-man show with Miyazaki. Like every time Miyazaki's not like involved in a project, that's a major red flag to FromSoft fans. Like that's the actual serious mindset to these people is that like, well, if Miyazaki's not attached to it, it's just going to be Dark Souls 2 and a disappointment. That's the mindset of like, FromSoft fans is that they've deified Miyazaki as like this R-Tour game dev, which he can't possibly live up to. But like to his credit, and I do really mean this, like it doesn't seem as if he's like letting it get to his head and making like the wrong decisions, because supporting Nintendo and making an exclusive title for Nintendo Switch 2 is exactly the sort of thing the company needs to do going forward if they're going to get away from the Elden Ring thing and get away from their like toxic fanboys and to like grow their brand, like because Kojima, like people like Kojima, people like, Keiji Inafune, so many of these Japanese creators were adamant, negotiate that like PlayStation is our guy, like, oh, our audience is on PlayStation, and it just ended up like destroying their careers, what we're seeing with Miyazaki is what we're seeing with this situation, right, is that Elden Ring was built up as this like huge monumental like cosmic just greatest of all time video game, and in less than 5 years, it's on Nintendo Switch, and we have an exclusive title. Like that's the long and short of it, right? Like that's what happened after Elden Ring won Game of the Year and like was propped up as this game that sold like tens of millions of copies. Outsold Baldur's Gate 3. Was the huge baller title of the generation. The only reason to own a PlayStation 5 and Xbox. Like the greatest game ever made until the next Elden Ring FromSoft game comes out. Like this is the reason to the greatest game to come out in recent memory, like the best game of all time, and not only is it on Switch now, it's also getting the developers are also making a Switch exclusive title, and I do think that's like a really strong indication of where things are going to go from here. Every time you prop up some nobody game that nobody actually cares about, whether it's Undertale or Hollow Knight or Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring, that game, no matter what it is going to be ported to Nintendo consoles in less than 5 years and will contribute to the overall public consensus that like Nintendo is the market leader, right? This is the end result of propping up Elden Ring the way you did, is that like it comes out on Nintendo consoles and nobody cares because it's just overshadowed by like better, newer games from other franchises. Because there were dozens of games in this presentation that were better than Elden Ring. Like Rhythm Heaven is more hardcore. Tamagotchi Life is going to have more going on with it. I can see Tamagotchi Life outselling Elden Ring. We have like Mario Kart's going to outsell Elden Ring. Like Donkey Kong Bonanza looks awesome, right? There's just so much coming out in the foreseeable future that like Elden Ring, the Game of the Year contender, coming out on Nintendo consoles is just going to be completely overshadowed. And not simply because of like major Nintendo exclusives, but just because like compared to actual video games, FromSoftware's like output looks pretty mediocre, right? Like again, this is the future, right? This is everything the industry has been building up to, right? Like without PlayStation and Xbox to leech off of, games like Elden Ring simply won't be possible. The idea that like these major third party games could come out and not come out on Nintendo hardware, it's a dying mindset, and I do think that like more and more you are going to see people getting angry every time a developer tries and like tries to put out that like old tired excuse. This idea that like the Switch can't run that. That narrative as of like last night, I think is completely and utterly dead. Like because there's no pretending anymore. Looking at the Switch 2 and what it offers, there is no denying that this is like a console that's far beyond what like the PlayStation and Xbox offers. It's far beyond like gaming PCs and especially like the Steam Deck, right? It's this huge, amazing thing that's just delivering like absolute bangers. And more and more, I feel as if all of the industry's like major shill properties, stuff like Astrobot, stuff like Baldur's Gate 3, like it's gonna become more and more obvious that like Elden Ring, like this stuff just is not gonna be competitive on Nintendo hardware. That is going to be the major thing we see with FromSoftware as they become more and more pronounced on Nintendo games, is that it's going to become more apparent that they simply can't compete. Like if FromSoftware is putting out the same game over and over again on Nintendo hardware, where Nintendo themselves is jumping in between like Mario Kart, Bonanza, Pokemon ZA, Metroid Prime 4, all of which are way better than Elden Ring. How exactly is FromSoftware going to be able to compete and remain relevant with that? It's very possible that this announcement, Duskbloods, is going to be the beginning of the end of the company. Because if the company can't be weaponized against Nintendo, like that's going to be the end of just like the blind worship for it. You know, I'm already seeing people like say that Duskbloods is going to be the worst FromSoft game ever just because it's a console exclusive. You know, never mind that like Demon Souls started as a PS3 exclusive. You know, never mind that Bloodborne was a PlayStation 4 exclusive, but Duskblood being a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive is a major issue because Nintendo. Okay, and the more people pull stunts like this, like the more things like this happen, the more and more that people are going to notice the pattern, and they're going to begin to like call it out more and more. And with this presentation, like I think it's already started. You know, it's shocking to me how the clickbaiters and like the shills are desperately trying to complain about like the Switch 2 and its price and its offerings, and it's just it never even really got off the ground. It's crazy just how well Nintendo is doing in 2025.